Same line. He was pulling freight cars filled with vegetables. The signalman had forgotten to warn his driver about the crossing. "That's nice. We don't need to stop," said Thomas happily. "Yes, we do," called his driver. But it was too late.
Line from the station ahead. Any minute, there could be a crash. "It's up to you now, Duck," cried the driver. Duck put every ounce of weight and steam against the cars. "It's too late!" Duck groaned. He veered into a siding where a barber had set up shop. He was shaving a customer. The silly cars had knocked their conductor off his van and left him far behind after he had whistled the warning. They were feeling very pleased with themselves.
Trolls. He soon found his mistake. He tried to whoosh, but he couldn't. He tried to stop, but he couldn't. He just kept rolling along. He didn't dare look at what was coming next. There was the station master's house. The station master was about to have breakfast. "Horrors!" cried Thomas and shut his eyes. The house rocked, broken glass tinkled, plaster was everywhere. Thomas had collected a bush on his travels. He peered into the room through its leaves. He couldn't speak. The station master was furious.
Clarabelle, was that a speed limit sign?
I think it was. And that was another one. We need to... slow down!
Nia, watch out!
You're going too fast! Oh, no!
Those bumpers don't look very safe to me. The last load poured down. Help! I'm choking! Cried Thomas. The water column stood at the end of the zone with the unsafe buffers. Suddenly, Percy found that he couldn't stop. The buffers didn't stop him either. "Oh!" wailed Percy. "Help!" The buffers were broken, and Percy was wheel-deep in coal.
Next, he was pulling some heavy freight cars. Then there was trouble. Thomas was puffing too fast round the bend. He toppled off the track. His load crashed down the bank. "Oh no!" cried Thomas. Luckily, no one was hurt.
Stay right there, James. I'll go and get help.
Topper hitched to another. By their weight, loaded cars run down the steep slope, pulling the empty ones up. Peter Sam duly waited at the bottom of the slope for the loaded cars. He never bumped cars unless they misbehaved. But the loaded cars couldn't see him properly. They thought he was Sir Handel. Their chance for trickery had come. "Faster! Faster!" they yelled. "No, no!
wailed the empty cars. It's Peter Sam, but it was no use. Hurrah! Hurrah! Roared the cars. Peter Sam shut his eyes. Beep! Beep! Wailed Peter Sam.
Thomas puffed as fast as he could, but he wasn't watching where he was going. Thomas didn't notice that the points had been changed. Thomas puffed into the sidings and biffed into the buffers. Sticky toffee splattered everywhere. Oh no, moaned Thomas. I can't give the children train rides when I'm this messy.
James had had an accident. The freight car's chance had come. Hurrah! Hurrah! They laughed, and banging their buffers, they pushed him down the hill. On! On! Yelled the cars. I've got to stop! I've got to stop! Groaned James. Disaster lay ahead. Something sticky splashed all over James. He had...
There could be a crash. It's up to you now, Duck, cried the driver. Duck put every ounce of weight and steam against the cars. It's too late, Duck groaned. He veered into a siding where a barber had set up shop. He was shaving for customers. The silly cars had knocked their conductor off his van and left him far behind after he had whistled the warning.
Roblox YouTube Shorts until we...
And he huffed and puffed through tunnels. He came over the top of a big hill. You can't catch us, laughed the freight cars. Whee! But there was trouble ahead. Duck had stopped at the crossing at the bottom of the hill. Arthur's driver applied the brakes, but it was too late.
Tired. I'm winning, gasped Oliver. But it was too late. Oliver lay bruised and bemused, bunker down in the turntable well. Duck surveyed the damage. Hello, Oliver. Are you being a good gracious engine? Beg pardon, but we really don't like this sort of surprise. Donald and Douglas will miss their turntable until it is mended.
Applied the brakes, but it was too late. Luckily, no one was hurt. Stop being pushy, Donald snapped. Don't call me pushy, Douglas.
Engine knows you cannot trust freight cars. Go on, they yelled and bumped Percy's driver and fireman off the footplate. Ow, said Percy, sliding past the board. Percy was frantic. That's enough! Percy was sunk.
For a big engine like Henry, the yardmaster quickly phoned the signalman. Henry roared past the signal box. I'll soon make up for lost time. The signalman couldn't hear the warning. By the time he did, Henry was far away in a cloud of steam. But When Henry reached the coastal track, his hopes for a fast run were dashed. Fog floated everywhere. "I can't see," cried Henry. Nor could his driver. And when he could, it was too late.
Then, a yellow signal appeared ahead. His driver prepared to stop, but the home signal was down. "All clear, Henry. Away we go." They couldn't know the switches from the main line to a siding were frozen, and the home signal should have been set at danger, but snow had forced it down. A freight train was waiting in the siding to let the flying kipper pass, and the driver and fireman were drinking cocoa in the caboose. "The kipper is due," said the conductor. "Who cares?" said the fireman. "This is good cocoa." The driver got up. "Come on, fireman, back to our engine." They got out just in time. Henry's driver and fireman had jumped clear before the crash, but Henry lay dazed and surprised.
Us! Jack jumped in and lifted his front loader up against the bridge. He pushed with all his might. Thomas saw the flagman. His driver applied the brakes, but it was too late. "Cinders and ashes!" cried Thomas. Jack didn't let go. Finally, Thomas's driver backed Thomas to safety. "Hold on, Jack!" Rushed to help. Jack couldn't hold the bridge any longer. "Are you all right, Jack?"
Long for a nice run. It's what an engine really needs. Quite so, Mr. Oliver. May I suggest that you speak to the Fat Controller about your problems? Oliver just grew unhappier, and he was rough with the trucks. "You're no good, Oliver. You're dangerous. We want Percy." "Pa, Percy's far too busy to be bothered with the likes of you." And he bumped the trucks hard. The storm and the fresh air couldn't help but brighten Oliver's spirits. They made good speed until it was time to collect some important mail from Harold the helicopter. "Come on, Harold." They waited and waited. At last, Harold landed. "Sorry I'm late, Great Western. Had a bit of a problem with one of my arms. Kept letting me down when I was meant to be up. You know how it is," said Harold. "We know that we'll be late for our first run," replied Oliver's driver. Soon they were on their way again. Ahead was a red signal light. Oliver didn't realize that the signalman had dozed off waiting for them. Oliver whistled several times, but the signal stayed red. "There must be something wrong with that signal. We'll go slowly and stop by the signal box," said his driver. But they never reached it. The points before the signal box were switched to an old track. They were going the wrong way. Oliver's fireman was concerned. We need to find a water tower soon. Instead, they saw an old rundown station. Disaster lay ahead.
His train harder than he realized. Duck felt the weight on his buffers slacken. Then Duck noticed something else. There's no sign of a tail lamp, he puffed. He whistled, but there was no reply. Meanwhile, Henry had noticed something too. My train's getting heavier, he thought to himself. I'm slowing down. Then there was trouble. No one was hurt, but a strong smell of fish hung in the air.
The chain pulling Duncan's slate cars couldn't hold the weight. It suddenly snapped. Duncan plummeted down the incline. Help! He yelled. Glug, 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 he said. Bluggle my broiler. Duncan felt foolish and very wet.
This made Gordon very cross. He was so cross that he didn't see the signal telling him to stop. And he didn't see the goods train ahead until it was too late. Luckily, no one was hurt. But Gordon came off the rails and he was covered in gooey red jelly. Oh!
Later, Thomas was traveling home on the same line. He was pulling freight cars filled with vegetables. The signalman had forgotten to warn his driver about the crossing. "That's nice. We don't need to stop," said Thomas happily. "Yes, we do," called his driver. But it was too late. Next day,
"He's rude to you. He wouldn't dare cause me any trouble."
George had been taken to some yards to work. Duck arrived with a train of empty freight cars. George was blocking his way, and a car was stuck on the main line. "Let me through," demanded Duck. "You'll just have to wait," replied George. "There's no time to wait. I must clear my freight cars from the main line to let Gordon through." "Then he'll have to wait too," said George. Duck's driver went to complain to the station master, but the signalman had set the signal to allow Gordon to speed through. His passengers were singing his praises, and he was making express time.
"I'm the greatest! Just watch me fly by!"
He whistled long and loud as he approached the station. Suddenly, he saw a freight car on the line ahead.
"Get out of my way!"
But the freight car wouldn't move until Gordon forced it by accident. Gordon was
in the yard and backed up to the paint trucks. But Diesel was in the yard too. "Now I'll show Thomas who's best," Diesel whispered, and he gave the trucks an extra hard shunt. Paint pots flew into the air and splattered down all over Thomas. Time Thomas saw Harry, he gave him a biff. And when Harry saw James, he gave him a bump. Soon the steamies were biffing and banging at the island. Tom and some trucks into the yard. He was taking great care, but the track was bumpy. Suddenly, they started to come off the track. Some of them headed straight for the water tower. The water tower creaked and wobbled. Then it started to tip. The water tower crashed down across the runway. Luckily, no one was hurt. The runway's cracked, cried Percy, and the track is blocked. Gordon and the express until it was too late. The brake van passed Gordon, but the tar wagons didn't. Luckily, no one was hurt, but Gordon was very cross. Now look what you've done.
Very cranky. So cranky, this made Cranky very cranky. So cranky that he swung his arm around and dropped the pipes onto the tracks instead of the trucks. Whoops, said Cranky meekly.
It was unloading a huge ship's boiler. Suddenly, the crane swung the boiler and knocked Edward right off the track. Cranky had been watching. You useless little engines are always in the way. Which was the fastest track to take to the farm. Edward was in such a rush, he didn't ask the signalman. "Stop!" shouted the signalman. "That track is closed!" But it was too late. Edward rattled around the bend and straight into a barrier. Parcels flew everywhere. "I'll never deliver the parcels on time now," he moaned. Gordon, he was going fast. Then there was trouble. Gordon hit the pipes with a loud crunch. He came off the tracks. It was a terrible mess.
Different is what makes you special. And that made Harvey feel better. Out on the branch line, Percy was having trouble with the trucks. Faster we go, pull 'em along, don't let 'em slow. Help! Cried Percy. His driver applied the brakes. But it was too late. He went off the rails at Bulgy's bridge. Luckily, no one was hurt.
But it was even harder to control them when he was going down again. And then there was trouble.
Help! Help! Help!
The next day, Donald was in a bad mood. Duck could see he was getting too close to the buffers. "Look out!" Duck shouted, but it was too late.
Goody-goody tattletales like you, I suppose? Percy and Duck did not want to be tattletales, so they said nothing. Diesel, thinking he could get away with his bad behavior, was ruder than ever. Next day, he was shunting freight cars full of china clay. He banged the cars hard into the buffers, but the buffers weren't secure. The silly cars were sunk. Sir Topham had
A little later, the fog came down. As they approached the same area, they saw the amber light again. "Here we go," said Henry's driver. Then, unknown to Henry, the gates mysteriously closed by themselves, and the signal went red. The freight cars had seen everything, and they were spooked. "Faster, faster! There's a ghost about!" "Stop, stop!" yelled Henry. A mysterious figure watched Henry go by. Ahead was a landslide blocking the line. Henry braked hard, but the freight cars hit some of the rubble and plunged into the ravine. Just then, Henry's driver saw a strange sight coming towards them.
To see that nothing fell off. Percy was still being cheeky. His driver always shut off steam just outside the station. Percy wanted to surprise the coaches by coming in as quietly as he could. But the porters didn't hear him either. Percy gave them such a fright that boxes and bags burst everywhere. "Oh!" groaned Percy. Sticky streams of jam trickled down Percy's face. A top hat hung on his lamp iron. Worst of all, a pair of trousers coiled lovingly around his funnel. Everyone was very angry.
Falcon didn't like the tunnel. It was curved and he couldn't see. "I want to get out! I want to get out!" he sighed. One moment, everything seemed safe, then suddenly... Falcon was derailed and hung dangerously over the edge.
Steamed across the island. He felt very pleased with himself. He was sure the other engines would forget his clunk-click and treat him properly now. He saw Emily coming. He listened for her toot-toot. But Emily didn't toot at all. This made Gordon very cross. He was so cross that he didn't see the signal telling him to stop. And he didn't see the goods train ahead until it was too late. Luckily, no one was hurt. But Gordon came off the rails and he was covered in gooey red jelly. Oh! Whoa! Elephant Park loomed ahead. Duncan's driver applied the brakes, but it was too late. The statue flew through the air and landed in the lake. Luckily, nobody was hurt.
Hang on, that sounds like an engine.
How can it be? No engine's supposed to come through here for at least another hour.
That sounds like Alfred, but what's he doing with all those tankers?
At long last, my revenge is about to be completed.
Oh crap, he's on the same line.
Oh God, pardon, Henry. You have a very important passenger to meet today. And his name is Lucifer.
Oh, God! Oh, my God! What the hell just happened?
Show special clattered and shattered. Then, Scholar, we saw Rusty at a junction ahead. Rusty was pulling cars of special ice cream. Out of my way! I can't stop! Rusty stopped right across the tracks. Scarloey bashed into Rusty's cars. Ice cream flew into the air and spattered all over the engines. Rusty was cross. Thomas raced into the yard. Percy was coming the other way. Whoa! Thomas bumped straight into Percy, and the bunting flew up into the air. Percy's freight cars came off the track, and so did Thomas. You've spilt my bunting, moaned Percy.
But because they were watching Harold, they missed a signal and went onto the wrong line. Gordon was traveling to trouble. Ahead was a tunnel under repair. His driver reduced steam and braked hard. But it was too late. Ago, a little engine was returning home. It was a misty, moonlit night. Suddenly, the engine lost control and plunged over the side into the swamps below.
Be careful, Percy, called his driver, but Percy was in a hurry. He didn't see that the switch had failed and that he had been diverted into a siding. "Look out, Percy!" shouted his driver and applied the brakes, but it was too late. The driver and fireman had jumped clear, but squashed fruit squirted all over Percy. Sir Topham had a...
He collected some coal from the coaling plant. Then he raced across the countryside. "Ha!" laughed Thomas. "I can get these trucks really messy and get the coal to the docks on time." Then there was trouble. The rusty coupling broke. Thomas's trucks were rolling by themselves. "Cinders and ashes!" cried Thomas. Thomas applied his brakes, but he stopped too quickly. The trucks bumped into the back of Thomas, and the coal spilled all over the tracks. Thomas was stuck.
Thomas grew more and more excited. Too excited for his own good. "I'm glad I'm a splendid engine," he puffed. "Sir Topham Hatt thinks I'm really useful. I had a race with Bertie once. I whooshed through the tunnel and stopped an inch from the buffers." Then Thomas made his mistake. Just like this, he boasted.
Danger lay ahead. Now for our plan, giggled the cars. Go faster, go faster. They pushed Thomas over the switches. Slow down, called Thomas's driver and applied the brakes. Poor Thomas stood dazed and surprised in a muddy pond as a toad eyed him suspiciously. Bust my buffers, muttered Thomas. The day started so well, too.
Cars. A sign read slow, steep bends and ravine ahead, but the silly cars never saw it. Then, it was too late. Peter Sam arrived at the scene of the disaster. His driver sighed. This was our fault. We didn't secure them properly. We'll have to get help to pull them out.